Hi everyone, I'm Ravi, Math 6. We're going to switch gears now in this video and we're going to talk more about lines, okay? Or we also call them linear functions. So what are lines? Well, lines are basically when you have, line is nothing but a collection of points, right? And it's one dimensional, that is, it has no width, it only has length, right? The points just go left to right, but they don't go up or down. It's just one dimension. So now we can't always keep drawing lines. We'll be interested in how do we represent lines using equations. All right. So the one thing that is most important when we talk about lines is we want to somehow talk about the steepness of the line, because the steepness will sort of tell us if it's rising or if it's, as we go from left to right, is my line rising, is my line horizontal, is my line vertical, or as I go from left to right, is my line falling, right? So how do we measure steepness? And so for that, we're going to talk about a very important concept, and we call that slope. Okay, and so we can think about slope as the measure of steepness of a line. Okay, so how do we find slope of a line? So the slope of a line passing through the points x1, y1 and x2, y2 is given by m equals change, or m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Or you can think about it as change in y over change in x. Now, know one thing that we cannot have, right? We had slope was y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Note that x1 cannot be equal to x2, right? Because what would happen if x1 was equal to x2, I'd get a 0 in the denominator, and I cannot have a 0 in the denominator. So make sure that your denominator doesn't become 0, okay? All right. So let's see some facts about slope, okay? 1, if m is positive, right? So if my slope turns out to be positive, then the line rises from left to right. Right? So as we go from left to right, our line is going to rise. So let's say something like that. Right? That is positive slope. 2, if m is less than 0, or if the slope is negative, then the line falls from left to right. So as an example, if I had negative slope, as I went from left to right, my line would fall, right? So this has negative slope. If m equal to 0, then the line is horizontal. Okay, and finally, right, let's see y first. So let's say I have a horizontal line here. Right, let's pick 2 points here. We have, say this is my point x1, y1, and say this is my point x2. But note here that my y coordinate is still the same. So when I take my slope for this line, I have change in y, which is y1 minus, or y2 minus y1, which is just y1 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, which comes out to be 0 over x2 minus x1, and that is 0. So for a horizontal line, for any horizontal line, my slope is going to be 0 because there is no rise. Like think in terms of rise and run. There is no rise. It's only a run. Yes. So my numerator becomes 0, and so its slope is always going to be 0. And then finally, the slope of a vertical line is undefined. Okay, again, let's say this is my vertical line here, right? Let's pick 2 points on this line. So this is, say, coordinate x1, this is going to be y1, and say this is the second point. Again, if you look here, the x coordinate remains the same, but the y coordinate changes. So if I try to find the slope, I get m equals y2 minus y1 over x1 minus x1, which gives me y2 minus y1 over 0. And if you remember, we said that the denominator cannot be 0, otherwise it's not defined. And so in this case, there's no defined slope, so slope is undefined. Okay? So for a horizontal line, a slope is going to be 0, and for a vertical line, the slope is going to be undefined always. Okay, so we saw how to find the slope. So let's go ahead and find the slope of a line that passes through the point 2, 3, and 4, 6. So I know that slope m equals y2 minus y1, or the change in y, divided by change in x, or x2 minus x1. So again, I'm going to pick this point as my x1, y1, and this point is my x2, y2. Okay, if I go ahead and substitute, I get y2 minus y1 becomes 6 minus 3, and x2 minus x1 becomes 4 minus 2, which is going to be 3 over 2. So the slope of the line passing through the points 2, 3, and 4, 6 is going to be 3 over 2. Now, I just want to make a quick note here is that if I tried to do, say, m equals y1 minus y2 over x1 minus x2, right? You would see that I would end up getting the same slope because I would get y1 minus y2 would become 3 minus 6 divided by 2 minus 4. And so I'd end up getting a negative in the numerator and a negative in the denominator, and that makes it 3 over 2. So as long as you're consistent with y2 minus y1 and x2 minus x1, or y1 minus y2 and x1 minus x2, you will end up getting the same slope. However, a common mistake is when students do something like m equals y2 minus y1 over x1 minus x2. That is incorrect. That is going to give you the incorrect slope.